All righty. So welcome everybody to the event, PT Power Hour and a Half. Kind of extended it there so we could get a good conversation going. So I just wanted to quickly introduce myself. I'm the one who's kind of been blasting you guys on the event page. So my name's Haley Anderson. I'm currently a student at Regis University in Denver. I'm also the current APTA Colorado Core Ambassador. And I am going into my third year. So yay. I also have, you'll see Johnny Herrera's name. He's going to be monitoring the live questions that you guys have. So feel free to put those just on the comment section. And he's also my fellow classmate, so he also goes to Regis. All right, so I'm going to just kind of go over some quick things about our event here. So, like I said, it's called PT Power Hour. And we're gonna have a conversation kind of addressing racial disparities at the patient, provider, and policy levels here tonight in our professions in PT, as well as addressing it in PTA. And thank you to our sponsors really quick, which is Rep Fitness, Rise Coffee Brewing Company, and Kodiak Cake. So all you guys who are here tonight will be entered into some raffle prizes. So we'll have 3 winners for a month's free worth of Rise Coffee Nitro Cold Brew, 1 winner of a Kodiak Cakes Variety Goodies package, and then 1 winner of a $25 gift card for Rep Fitness. And I will also be posting some discount codes at the end available to all you guys that you can use online. Perfect, so just a couple rules or guidance. So again, you can comment on the Facebook Live and we'll try to get to all of your live questions. And of course, be respectful in the chat. And also the last thing is make sure that you are going on the event page so that if you do win a raffle prize, it's easy for me to contact you. And now, while all of you guys are here, so we have our guest panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in 1 moment. Let's see. Perfect. So we'll start with Dr. Amber Brown, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Amber Brown, owner of Root Physical Therapy and Wellness in Plano, Texas. So it's just a little north of Dallas. I'm board certified in women's health. I'm a pelvic floor specialist, CLT, so certified lymphedema therapist, yoga teacher, guest lecturer, PhD candidate because I'm going into teaching in academia. And I'm a health and finance coach and on the board for the National Association of Black Physical Therapists. Oh, you're on mute.
And then Dr. Savage, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Bria Savage. I'm the owner of Savage Physical Therapy, which is a mobile concierge physical therapy practice. I'm also a full-time travel PT. I'm currently doing a contract in Monroe, Louisiana at a skilled nursing facility.
Awesome. Thank you. Welcome. And then Dr. Briana Scott.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Briana Scott. I am a full-time outpatient physical therapist at Benchmark. I also work PRN in acute care, my favorite setting at Piedmont Vet Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm actually on the NABPT Georgia chapter board. So shout out to Dr. Brown. National Association of Black Physical Therapists is what that stands for.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, and then we go to Dr. Kenael Segal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Kenael Segal, and I'm the owner of Lotus Physical Therapy and Wellness in New Jersey. We're about 45 minutes away from New York City, so it doesn't even make sense telling you exactly where it is, but we're so close. In my practice, we primarily treat men and women with pelvic floor dysfunction. I'm also certified in Pilates, and I teach here and there with Herman and Wallace, or assist with Herman and Wallace, and I teach at Rutgers University as a part-time lecturer.
Excellent. Welcome. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Michael Cromartie.
Hey everybody, I am currently a full-time outpatient physical therapist at the Miami VA. I also serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy, and also the author of the blog post published in PT in Motion Code Switching.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hopefully we get into that blog post as well. It's a great post. I'll post it on the event page for you all. Awesome. So we're here to talk about racial disparities in healthcare, and in particular in the profession of PT. So if anybody has, what does this statement mean to you when you hear racial disparities in healthcare, or specific to your practice in physical therapy? What does that mean to you?
I'll start it off.
Yeah, great.
So racial disparity for me is basically people of color don't get the same quality or quantity of care that those who are non-people of color receive. So for an example, where I grew up at, the high school I went to, sports teams I played on, we didn't have any athletic trainers, any physical therapists on staff. We only had coaches. Versus if you go to the north side of town, they had everything: athletic trainers, kinesiotherapists, people who were just there to stretch them. They had everything. So it was like us people of color who stayed on the south side, we didn't get the same treatment as those on the north side.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Scott, you had something to say on this.
Yes, definitely you can see those same lines, but specific to physical therapy, I find it most striking in acute care, because I feel like that's where you see a lot of variety of patients, but you get to also see a variety of staff that's going to interact with that patient, and you can definitely see how people feel about certain patients. And I have definitely seen some negative feelings and expressions about people of color, both Black and brown, or sometimes even anyone who just doesn't speak English will have a problem with the entire staff who has to treat that room. So I definitely see a lot of healthcare disparities. And like she said, even when it comes to region, I work in Atlanta. My outpatient job is on the south side of Atlanta. Not only do I get paid extra to be there, because apparently a lot of therapists don't want to work down there. We don't have the same amount of staff. We don't have the same quality of clinic. We don't get techs. We don't have all these things that I've learned that the north regions have. And I just think that's crazy, because we're actually the busiest clinic in Georgia. So how is it that we don't have the same resources?
Right. I think that speaks to kind of what we're hoping to tackle a lot as well. Great. So if anybody has anything else to say on that, if not, I'll kind of jump into some student submitted questions we have. And first one is submitted by a student, and they say, something that I keep thinking about is equity versus equality. I've heard the argument from people that everyone is receiving the same equal opportunity. However, there are people who do not acknowledge systemic racism. Knowing that systemic racism exists, how as a provider can we provide equitable healthcare to our patients?
I think I'll jump in on this one. So I think it's important to first recognize that biases do exist. Whether you believe that you are a part of the problem or not, we all have to really stop and think about our own biases. And I think everyone has biases, whether you're brown or non-brown, right? We all have biases. It may have been taught, it's probably subconscious. It's just how we've learned things and who we've learned it from. So I think just really stepping back and thinking about what biases do I have, And I know there are some tests available online where you can take a test to figure out what biases you have, but I think starting there would be a good place. And then once you recognize your biases, you have to make a really, really strong conscious effort to not allow those biases to take part in how you treat a particular person. And if you are able to recognize that I'm biased against individuals who don't speak English as a first language, then when you walk into the room of someone who doesn't speak English as a first language, you have to really be cognizant of, how am I approaching them? Am I standoffish? Am I being short with them? Or how am I treating them differently than I would treat someone else? You just have to recognize it and really try to work against it.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And Dr. Brown?
And picking it back off that, just making sure that you, when you already do your internal test and make sure you know about your own biases, making sure you're not talking more than the patient. Actually listen to the patient. Don't talk to them, right? Like let them is an interaction. That's how you get to know your patient more and actually understand the baseline for how you could best treat your patient, because not everyone comes at the same level. And so not everyone's going to need the same cookie cutter treatment. So really listening to your patient after you've done the internal assessment to kind of see where you are makes a huge difference for how your patient even perceives. Because guards can come down when they know that, oh, I don't have to be as protective of myself at this moment. This is actually a clinician who cares.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point. Kind of goes into my next question regarding building trust as providers. So how do you guys in your practice, how do we have care that is fully anti-racist, and have you seen this in your practice, either from coworkers or that you've utilized yourself in building those kind of relationships with your patients?
I'll speak up on this one. So I was at my first clinical rotation, and I was going to be shadowing actually a CI who wasn't assigned to me for the first couple of days because my CI was out. And he's a very tall white man, and everyone had like a really strong opinion about him. And the opinion was actually that he was someone who was prejudiced. So when I went into his office, I was actually really nervous, and I sat in front of him with my arms crossed, not knowing what my body language was doing, but I just sat in front of my arms crossed, and I probably had a really humble look on my face. He was kind of intimidating already, and now that I had heard that, I was just a little afraid. And I remember the first thing he said to me was, you can uncross your arms, Briana, because I'm not here to threaten you. I understand that we're different. And he just began to talk to me about some of his favorite students, about how one of them was a student of color. He talked to me about how he was racist when he was younger, and how, growing up into a man that he is now, that he realized where he was wrong, and how he tries his best, not to play into that type of stereotype at work. And it really struck me because I had already made an opinion about him in my mind. And so when he called me out about my posture, he was like, I'm not here to threaten you. I'm not here to belittle you. I know what my reputation is, but I'm just saying, like, you can uncross your arms. I wanted to be upset, but I couldn't. I'm like, oh, okay. So not to say that he was perfect in his display of anti-racism, but I think he went the extra mile to make me feel comfortable, because I think he knew what the office felt about him already.
Sure.
And I can kind of speak to that as well. So my now coworker, and he was my CI for my last rotation, I've noticed that he kind of, and he's an old, middle-aged white man. Last time I called him an older white man, and he felt offended because he's only 40. But anyway, I've noticed that I won't say that he's not himself, but he goes that extra mile kind of when he does have a patient that's a person of color. Our caseload is predominantly either African American or Hispanic, and I see how easily he's able to relate, or not relate, but build rapport with them. And he's very open about race and acknowledges, he doesn't try to act like he doesn't see color. He acknowledges it and embraces it. And because we're treating veterans, he lets them know, hey, I still appreciate you for your service. And at the end of the day, I want to see you get better because of what you've done for this country. So, I think him, I guess addressing that elephant in the room, because I have had patients who, will come to me as the African American male in the clinic and be like, yeah, they never believe us when, we tell them we're hurting or if this is going on. And then, I believe my, colleague, he knows that's going on. And so he does his best to try to, act against that and let them know like, hey, look, I believe what you're saying. We're going to try to do our best to be able to give you the best care possible.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of as a follow-up in terms of patient care, I'd be curious to hear, this was also a submitted question. It's in regards to kind of historical lack of trust. So the question is, throughout history, we've seen intentional mistreatment of Black patients in healthcare. So how do you, as a clinician, combat this historical and justified lack of trust that you may see in patients of color in order to give them the appropriate care and get that buy-in that you would want from a patient? Yeah.
I mean, I think it sounds like it was addressed in, the last two comments where it's all about just being personable,
right?
Seeing the patient for who they are and letting them know that they can be open with you and being open yourself about any lack of mistrust, or you have to build a relationship with the patients, and you have to make them, you have to really work hard to show them that you are there to help them. And if at any point you cross a point where you shouldn't have gone and you've done the wrong thing or said the wrong thing, that you're human and you acknowledge that and accept that and apologize for it and ask, what could I have done differently or whatever. Just apologize for it and own up to it, and continue trying to build a personal relationship.
Definitely. I'm not sure who raised their hand first, but Dr. Brown. Go with you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know I'm in a different situation because I have my own private practice now, but even when I was with a busier outpatient clinic, your first impression is key. Slowing down, actually taking the time, because we're in these busy clinics and we're rushing around doing everything, trying to finish our notes, trying to make sure we get a message across to someone else. You're not giving that attention to your patient. That's a huge factor as far as building that trust, but then also that respect of how you're addressing your patients with the Mr. or Mrs. or doctor, whatever. Like putting the title makes a huge difference for a lot of patients to be like, oh, okay, you see me, you read my chart, you know a little bit about me. Or if you do have to step away during those times, make sure you explain, I'll be right back. I just have to go do this. Because when I was in a busier clinic, I would see people walk away without any kind of explanation. And just, I know even for myself, where I will look around like, what's going on? So as a patient, I know that they would probably feel more disrespect than me. So slowing down is key. It's easier said than done, but if you're being intentional about it, that's going to be a key factor too.
Sure. Thank you for that. And Dr. Scott, did you have something as well?
Yes, definitely, because this has actually come up in the clinic that I work at several times. And so something that I do is I actually take the time to explain everything that I know about what's going on with that patient. And sometimes I'll even try to speak up for maybe what they're experiencing in their other cases, their other healthcare workers. So a lot of patients we see are seeing multiple physicians. They're seeing us, they're seeing a chiropractor, they're seeing their physician, and maybe an orthopedist as well. And so they have genuine concern. I have patients straight up tell me, oh, that doctor's just making money off me. And what are you doing? What are you doing? Just making money off me too? I mean, it's really, really intense. And especially from the Black males, that's where I see it the most. The older Black men are the most distrustful in the system. So when I am with them, I make sure, if I have actually spoken with the doctor or have read doctor's notes, I will explain, well, actually, no, your doctor is aware of this note or this thing that's going on with you. I'm aware of that, and that's why I'm doing this thing in therapy today. So we're all working together. So sometimes, even though I may not know the physician, one-on-one or in person, I do try to help the patient understand or feel comfortable with everyone that's in the plan of care, and especially what's going on in therapy.
Yeah, definitely. And we do have kind of a live question. I don't know if this is different specifically for the business owners, but they're asking, what steps do you recommend clinics take or that you have taken to make patients of color feel welcome when they walk in that door? Are there any specific steps besides just building that rapport that we've been talking about that you kind of integrate into your own business?
I would definitely say the rapport. I mean, you don't treat anyone differently just because, you know, they're anyone of color.
Yeah.
But again, slowing down, addressing them, speaking their name, looking eye contact, all the things that you would think of, like, do it. We lose it a lot in our profession, but all of that are welcoming, whether it's their 5th time at the appointment or at your clinic or, you know, 20th time, it doesn't matter. Every time they walk in, greet them, slow down and greet them. And that makes a big, for me, that makes a big difference. Because that's, again, starting the treatment, like right off the bat, that's how we're interacting that day.
Yeah, I would even say, in addition to that, I try to start anything even before the patient comes in. You know, as business owners, we have to put our brand out there. So our brand is going to be on social media or what other people say or think or feel about our own business. So me personally, and I think any business owner would say the same thing too, like our brand starts there, right? It starts before the patient even walks in the door. So what are you putting on social media? What faces do they see on your posts, right? How are you addressing people in your blog posts, or what images do you have on your website, right? I think all of those can tell the patient, like, oh, I see a lot of different faces, you know, I see lots of variety of brown faces on the website or on social media. So she must be, or he must be very welcoming and open with and comfortable with treating people who look differently.
And just to bounce off what you just said, I've had a couple people, especially within the last couple of weeks, but, you know, since I've been open, who have reached out and said, I've seen you on, you know, Instagram, and you, like, I really feel comfortable and I don't even know you. And all because of how my branding is, that people feel comfortable and they're like, I believe in you and I want to come give you a shot. So all about branding.
Definitely. And to you, Dr. Savage, I know you said you practice in travel PT. Is there anything different, just in what you've seen traveling to different places, things you have seen work in different places versus things that didn't work? Is there anything different? I personally don't know too much about travel PT, so I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so with the different contracts I've had, I've traveled to some of the most like non-diversified settings, especially home health. I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma not too long ago, and I was assigned to a few regions, Bartlesville and some other small towns. And while I was there, if you don't know, Oklahoma still has a lot of Native American like communities, and so I was the one that was assigned to the Native American community, and part of that was because they feel more comfortable with another person of color coming in to treat them. But also with that, noticing the documentation and the quality of care that I perceived from the documentation versus when I went to the more suburban parts, I noticed the discrepancy. The suburban notes, they were flawless. They did A, B, C, and D, so much detail, versus when I read the notes for my Native American communities, it was very vague, very dull, and I literally had to start from scratch because I couldn't get anything from the notes. So it was still racial disparities with travel PT, going to Native American communities, going to predominantly white communities, and then coming back to Louisiana to where I am now. Definitely see differences in how patients are treated, how patients are perceived, and they also pretty much assign me to where people are most comfortable with people of color.
Thank you for that. It's interesting to hear as somebody who goes to different settings more often, maybe. So kind of switching gears a little bit, one question that has popped up a lot that students have is how can providers kind of try to have these sorts of conversations more often and pushing the profession towards greater racial equity and justice without always having to consult providers of color? Can anybody speak to that balance of including providers of color yet not burdening them, if that makes sense?
I guess I'll start with this one. I guess my advice for that would be kind of, speak amongst yourselves, kind of this whole allyship, educate others who may not feel the same way you do about why it's important for diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you're not going to have someone that's, a person of color in the conversation. However, while I think it is, it may be burdensome. I think it's important that, we do include people of color in these conversations because, while it may become tiring or whatever, people are finally starting to listen. And so, we can take advantage of this opportunity that people are listening to finally say, what's been going on or how we feel, pertaining to these situations. But, I think if you are afraid that you might become burdensome to somebody, just have those conversations amongst yourselves where, you're educating each other, like, kind of at the watering hole, at work where you may have noticed somebody said something that you don't think is okay or, is right. And so you kind of say, hey, look, just want to pull you to the side and let you know, like, this isn't okay because of this, and then if you don't, of course, want to involve someone that's a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
And I think also we have to take advantage of this time as far as people of color providers. We're welcoming those conversations right now. Like Dr. Cromartie already said, like, people are starting to listen now, so we're welcoming it. We're wanting to become allies. We're wanting to help. And as time progresses, because, systemic racism and all those things weren't built overnight, so it's going to take time, conversations, and effort to break down those walls, to bridge those gaps. So definitely continue to include people of color in those conversations so that you can get a more, I guess, straight way perspective, like for someone who's walking in those shoes versus someone who's just going off what they think or what they feel. Come talk to us. We are welcoming those conversations right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to piggyback on Dr. Savage, I was having the sentiment that, it definitely doesn't feel like a burden to me. And I know that there are plenty of other physicians who feel called to this. They're called right now in this moment to be the voice. And we would hope that any of our brothers and sisters, white, black, brown, whatever, would feel comfortable to come to us. And I think you'll find, like, the organizations like the NABPT, there's a diversity task force within the APTA. So if you're looking to your resources in those areas, you'll find the people who don't mind talking about this all day long. And so I feel like there should never be a lacking in resources for any person not of color to come to a person of color in this profession and say, hey, can you help us? Can you come speak with our group? Can you do a Zoom call with us? I mean, I feel like there's plenty to go around. And I hope that, our people of color don't feel like they're burdening us. I hope they don't.
And I think it's one of those that we know if we are tired, right? I know someone who I could tap on the shoulder like, hey, I was asked to do this. I'm tapping out, but can you step in? There's always going to be a resource. Mm-hmm. And if you stop and think about it, us not having these conversations is how we got here to begin with. Right? So, I mean, I know we could all probably have our favorite little stories we have from when we were going through PT school, but it's one of those things, like, we got in the current situation we're in right now because we weren't having these conversations. And I think that's key for us to continue, not just, by the end of summer when we go all back to school and everything, continue it. And it's not just with us. I know this is talking, we are Black physicians, but other cultures. This is a key time to just really stop and ask yourself, how is my interaction with everyone else? Is everyone like me? I know I mentioned this on other calls before, but is everyone in your clinic? Does everyone look the same in your clinic? But then your patients don't. Like, do your coworkers look the same, but your patients don't? Little conversations like that, I think, will make it big for us to be able to progress as a profession.
And kind of, I guess, piggybacking up, you know, you said going back to school and not forgetting about having these conversations. So in going back to school, we had another question from a student, two-part, kind of asking, in terms of including education around institutional and systemic racism and disparities in the PT curriculum, what do you see as the most important information for students to receive in their schooling? Is it a class? Is it a multitude of classes? Is it a curricular thread through each of the classes? What do you guys think is kind of the way to go about that?
We're all grinning because we're all know.
One class is not, one semester is not enough.
Right.
Exactly.
That was a call out.
I know I know like almost every program, because I'm realizing some clinicians, if they graduate by a certain time, they didn't even have the cultural competency. And I'm doing this because even when I was sitting in my class, I was like, this isn't like, these are stereotypes, you know? So, so I think they need to be, you know, revamped anyways. But I don't think it needs to be just one semester. I think there needs to be more people who are guest lecturers from different cultures, and understanding that we're not all monolithic. Like, you need variety. I think for us to really be able to truly treat our patients, you have to understand and get that firsthand experience. So no, I think we need to, as a profession, we need to do more when we're training.
Yeah, I think it absolutely does need to be.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, so no, I was gonna say, I think it really does need to be weaved into every single course and reminded, hey, remember when we talked about this? Here's a perfect time where your bias might come out, and how are you going to address that, right? And I think it just needs to be weaved into every single course possible. However it can fit in, it needs to be there. I think a good example of putting it all together is you know, the practicals that we all had as students, or our TOSCIs and our OSCEs, right? Where I think where I went to school, I was fortunate to, my school was Rutgers, and I went to school in, Rutgers is in Newark, so it's like all Black people. There's very, very little variety in Newark, but all the students were white, except for me. And some of the patients, the practice patients that we had, they did make attempts to make it more diverse, and I think that would be a really, really good thing for other schools to practice. I don't know what other schools are like, but bringing in patients who look different and having some sort of role play going on. They're like, I noticed that you said this and that made the patient feel uncomfortable, or you did this but you didn't do this last week with that patient. What was the issue there? You know, and just pointing things out, like, I noticed you did this, I noticed you said that, and taking it from there, because the only way to be better at this is to practice, right? We all know as PTs, you don't learn how to walk without walking. You have to actually practice it. So you're not gonna leave school taking cultural competency classes and weaving it into every program and suddenly be good at it. You need to practice it, and that needs to be part of the curriculum.
And just to kind of add to that, I think, you know, for me, I knew systemic racism was a thing, and I knew healthcare disparities were a thing. But until recent, I never really made the connection. Like, oh, there are these healthcare disparities because of this. So I think, you know, when we're in PT school and we talk about, okay, you know, African Americans are more likely to get hypertension, diabetes, whatever, we need to speak to it as to why. Because in my head, as a PT student, I am sitting here thinking, is there some genetic makeup for us as to why we are getting these things? Like, and then just recently it dawned on me, I'm like, that's why, you know, that makes sense. And, you know, I think of the cultural competency that we got in class, and the main thing that sticks out to me is we did a lot of role playing in our class. And me kind of being, I guess, comfortable with everybody in the class, I usually volunteered to go up and act. And there was one scenario, and kind of, I think someone spoke to this earlier, how most of the course work towards that basically were just stereotypes. And it kind of, the scenario was like a Black mom was dissatisfied with the level of care that her son or child was receiving, and so I had volunteered and became the Black mom who was dissatisfied with the level of care. And, I knew the stereotype they were trying to get me to feed into basically from reading the script. And when I finished, and because everyone heard the script before I started acting it out, when I finished, everyone was asking me why didn't I explode, give this angry Black woman stereotype. And so thankfully I got up there and kind of showed a level head, because I can only imagine what someone who thought that stereotype would have been, how they would have got up there, and then the rest of my classmates would have perceived like, yep, see, that's exactly how everyone thinks it would have gone down. But, so I think we've got to do better, when we do incorporate that into our curriculum, that we're not just feeding into these stereotypes, but rather, letting it be a level playing field to whatever the scenario may be.
Yes, definitely. Ooh, I remember that class, Michael, and I had a similar scenario too with another classmate. So I remember that. It's just so funny. But I was going to add that I think in combination with Dr. Segal was saying, bringing the experience. So something that University of Miami does that I love is they have a pro bono clinic. And it's not mandatory right now, but I was one of the coordinators for the clinic for 2 years. And there's something about getting in that clinic with that underserved population. These are people who can't afford physical therapy. In Miami, that looked like Hispanic patients who only speak Spanish. We had a couple of Haitian American patients. So it was really awesome to have our classmates who, some of them were afraid because they didn't speak a lick of Spanish. They're afraid because they're so different. They can't relate at all because they come from very wealthy families. But for them to get in there and just try, it just changes your perspective. I think it gives you a heart of compassion. So something I know the University of Miami has toyed around with is making the pro bono clinic and the other opportunities we do where we go into these communities of color and who are a little bit disparaged. We also team up with the medical school sometimes. They're trying to make it mandatory, right? It's a part of your credits. You have to do at least 2 or 3 of these events so you can understand, what it's like to interact with somebody who just doesn't look like you, who doesn't speak the same language as you, or you're going to have to figure out that compassion in order to make the session work. So I think that's something that I would love to see, not only University of Miami do, but hopefully something that other schools can replicate, because every state and every city has a community that needs therapy but can't afford it. And there's a way, there's a will, there's a way. So I would love to see that happen.
I know we had that in Nashville at my school, and it was required that you had to.
Awesome.
It was required, but then again, it was still one of those things where I was like, there was much that could have been guided for people,
right.
But it was a requirement. So at least people still had to have the experience.
Awesome.
Rutgers, it was, we also had that too, but I don't believe it was a requirement, but I think it should have been. I mean, what better place to get practice? And if we want to be PTs, why not practice? Even if they say, everyone could use the excuse, well, I don't have time. Well, take away some classes and just give us experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have been much more happy with something like that.
Definitely. These are all great ideas. As a student now, it gets the wheels turning for sure. So kind of piggybacking off of that and going into the faculty part, I know that some classmates, at least of me and Johnny's, have wondered about how racial differences in the profession are kind of reflected in a diversity of faculty. And obviously this is different, or might be different in your experience in school. But so while we know that there are these historical and systemic boundaries up for people of color getting into those higher positions potentially and those faculty hiring pools, do you feel that your education would have been different if you didn't have a faculty member that was of color? In your personal schooling experience, would it have been different, do you think? Or did you find yourself longing for that if you didn't have that?
Yep. I'll start there. I remember our first guest lecture. Well, I remember actually getting accepted into University of Miami and was scrolling through all the faculty, and I only saw one person of color. One. And I had to look him up a little bit because he's mixed race. So I was like, okay, I think so. And so I was like, oh man, this is okay. We'll see what this is about. And now, mind you, Miami is a little bit of a different animal because there is diversity. I mean, it's Miami. So we have a professor who English is her second language. Okay. but it still means something. You want to have someone who is Hispanic, you want to have someone who is Asian, you want to have someone who's Black. I mean, you want to see everybody up there. And so when I only saw, that one African-American person, I was a little disheartened. But I remember the day when we had our first African-American female guest lecturer, Dr. Pilgrims, and I was just jaw to the floor. And she was just talking about the APTA and why it's important to be a member. That was what her lecture was about. And I just couldn't wait to go up to her and talk to her at the end. And we've exchanged emails and we still stay in contact to this day. But each time I ran into a guest lecturer, or even the one time I had a CI who was African-American, it literally, my heart was exploding with joy. You just don't understand. I can't believe it. I have a Black CI. Like, I'm screaming inside because I just saw what it really was, like how rare we really are in the profession. So it's even more amazing to see someone who's in leadership, who's lecturing the class, who is your teacher, and you can go up to them and relate on another level. I mean, it's a good thing that, a variety of cultures are represented in faculty. And I feel like non-people of color maybe don't really understand why my heart was bursting with joy, because you can relate to your faculty member at any point in time. Your faculty members look like you. But when you're at this level of education, there's already only one or two of you in the program. And so if you do get lucky enough to have that person in leadership who you can relate to, I mean, it is jaw-dropping, like my jaw dropped, So it's very important, and I definitely long to be in leadership because of that. And I think that a lot of students of color will feel the same way, because it's almost life-changing when that person walks in the door and you're like, oh my gosh, they're brown. Wow.
I definitely agree with that too. When I was in school, I didn't even think to look up the professors of the program, because I clearly assumed way too much, because I'm like, I'm going to school in Newark. It's not going to be an issue. And I was very, very wrong. Not only was I the only Black student, there were zero professors. The department was not diverse at all. All of them were women. Yay for women. Actually, I shouldn't say that. 2 of them were men. So it was like, yay for women, but we're the Black women, right? There were none, absolutely none. And my mentors were another student who was Black, who was graduating as I was entering. So I kept in touch with him. And his mentor was a PT who worked at the hospital across the street, who does work and collaborate with the program. And she was Black as well. And she happened to be a family friend. So anytime I had any issues, it was me and the student, or me and that family friend. There was no one within the program, I felt like, who could really understand. Not to say that white people can't, because I did have my advisor who fortunately was one of the most open and understanding professors, who was very open about speaking with race, but she felt like they wouldn't listen to me. And she tried to advocate for us and let's get more people of color in the program. What about someone on the faculty? Can we do that? And it just, she felt like she was always, shut down and told no. And it was very discouraging. And anytime I went on to my clinical rotations and I saw another Black PT or student, it was kind of, from across the room, we all know, like, oh, hey, what's up? There's more of us now. Let's talk later. Right? And now you're best friends forever. That's how it happens, because there's so few of us. So when you find each other, you cling together. I spoke about this last week. All students graduating from, or entering and graduating PT school, of all the students, there's only 3% of those students that are Black, not just colored, but Black. And professors or any faculty, it's even less. It's 2.5%. So the small 3% of us, when we're in school, are looking for a smaller 2% of people who look like us, and most of us are not going to find it.
I know my undergrad was a private school. I went to WashU in undergrad, and I had more Black professors there than I did for my grad school, which was at HBCU. So I didn't do research because I was like, I'm going to HBCU.
Right, you assumed.
So I was one of 2 Black people of a class of 32 at the HBCU, right? And so granted, for the most part, the faculty was diverse, but it was when you don't have your classmates too, sometimes just like, I'll hang out with like maybe the one or two other Black people like in the class ahead of me. I was a graduate assistant, so I came really, really close to the secretary of the department who was Black. And so she helped me kind of navigate the school and figure out things from the back end. But like, that was my mentor, like the secretary of the department. And then when I had my first Black CI, we are still friends to this day. She joked, that was during the time when you had to watch like Downton Abbey and Scandal. She was like, in order for you to pass this clinical, you have to watch this. I'm like, oh, I'll do it. But we were bonding, I promise you. But we were able to to joke like that. And it was just so rewarding. I felt like I could truly be myself, which is tiring, which I know is a whole nother topic, but that is something in and of itself that you can put your guard down when you're with a teacher. And I've had that experience where I've gone in as a guest lecturer, and I've had students who have been like, can I get your contact information? You're like the first person I've seen. I need to make sure I know how to navigate school. I'm like, yeah, here you go. But yeah, I think having a Black faculty member is huge for the success.
Yeah, thank you for your, oh, go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm going to hop in here with a live question, kind of piggybacking off of all that. We have a live question asking, how are you all, either individually, as a group? I know you guys are all part of different organizations that help to do the above, but how are you all working to represent the underrepresented population in the profession as of right now, either through the organizations or individually?
Go ahead, Amber.
No,
Right.
Mike's going. Go, Mike.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, so like individually, I kind of keep my DMs open on social media, and so like I have like a plethora of students, reaching out, just asking like little insider information about PT school, like things it takes. And so, that's kind of my way of like, all right, doing everything I can to make sure that I, give somebody what I wish I had. Because when I was going into PT school, I don't think I've ever met a physical therapist before I was getting my shadowing hours. And so, just to kind of be, a resource for others, that's kind of what, I pride myself in nowadays. And then kind of also, I'm working on this DEI committee for the AASPT, with one of our things kind of improving leadership in the academy. We look for minorities or, we look for, women and things of that nature. And so because we had one event, a student reached out to me and asked how they could get involved. And I said, right now I don't know anything, but if something comes up, I'll be sure to reach back out to you. And sure enough, we had a meeting the other day, and we were looking for a position to fill, and they asked if we had anyone who we could, nominate or recommend for the spot. And I was like, oh, look at this. This is a sign right here. I said, I know somebody. So, just things like that, trying to do my best to, I guess, lift as I climb, making sure that I help those who, I wish I had the same kind of when I was going through.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So same as, go ahead, Dr. Savage, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so with what I talked about earlier about my high school, one of the things that I've been purposely doing is being in contact with some of like the football coaches, the basketball coaches, to make sure I go back and give them what I know we didn't get. So that's doing free movement screenings, doing some type of educational seminars on the weekends. I know the COVID has kind of pushed all of that back, but it's pretty much going back and, serving those underserved populations, going back doing that, starting scholarship funds. My business is launching its first scholarship for minority students. And then, as Dr. Cromartie said, keeping my DMs open, because I know when I was in undergrad, I saw one Black female physical therapist, and she was like my go-to person. So trying to be that for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yes, definitely both of those. I think the DMs is it's the easiest thing you can do, is just be an open space for anyone who sees you on social media or happens to find your phone number or email. I definitely do the same thing. And then I also, right now, I'm in the middle, coming to the end of the Gift Your Pick Me Up Scholarship, which is a scholarship fundraiser. I got on board with Matcha Henderson, who's a Black student. He started the scholarship last year. So we raised almost $7,000 to help get people into physical therapy school, especially those who don't have the money to get that application in or to take the GRE. And that happens to be the students of color most of the time. So the scholarship is open to everyone, but and just by default, by the way this country is, it's the students of color who apply for that scholarship the most. In addition, I was a recipient of the Minority Scholarship by the APTA, and I learned about it just by, like, you know, combing. I'm looking for all my coins, trying to get through school. So I was on the website, and I noticed that they have this Celebration of Diversity Gala. So the year before I even applied for that scholarship, I bought 2 tickets to the gala, because every ticket you buy goes towards that scholarship fund. Again, I went the year that I won the scholarship, and it's my mission to go every year and to hopefully one day buy a table and just to continue to give to that scholarship. And then with the University of Miami, our program director has a sincere desire to develop a minority recruitment and retention program. And that's something that other schools have already done. So I'm in contact with some of those pioneers, and I definitely want to work hard with UM to help them build that program as well, to get more students of color and really African-American students, because Miami they always going to meet the diversity quota, but they need more Black students, they need more Asian students, they just need a little bit more variety.
And back to that, donating your Pick Me Up, is that still going on, Dr. Scott?
It surely is. It will end on Monday, June 29th. At the end, I guess we're going to give out contact information, so we'll do that, but it's definitely still going on via GoFundMe.
Definitely. We'll make sure to post that as well, so people can have that resource. Yeah, thank you for those excellent things. Kind of going off of just general policy, and I know people mentioned the APTA a little bit on the live. So kind of the general question is, you know, we've seen APA take positions on different issues like firearm use, these things as a public health issue, and recently establishing more DEI organizations, steps, those sort of things. Are there next steps that you see from the APA or just any, in general, higher up policy-making organizations that would help us kind of combat these racial disparities that we've been talking about in our profession specifically? Is it just even taking a step towards acknowledging it as a public health crisis? Is that even helpful? What do you guys think?
Now, I had this conversation just recently with the New Jersey chapter. I am not a member of the APTA, but I'm always in contact with the New Jersey APTA just to make sure that they're doing the right thing and they're addressing certain things. I'm sort of a political person. I'm trying not to be. My husband doesn't want me to, but I always end up getting involved somehow. But when I didn't notice the New Jersey APTA making any statements on this whatsoever, and I knew other states had done so, and I, of course, sent a message very quickly. Why have you not made a statement? We are in New Jersey. It's one of the most diverse states and densely populated state in all of this country. How is it that you didn't get around to making a statement? It's as simple as putting it on the website, right? As simple as sending a letter to your members, making it public. What's taking you so long? And I got a response back very quickly that they're taking steps in order to do the right thing, and I can be a part of the change by becoming a member, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I have my reasons for not being a member, but we'll talk about that later. And then I reached out to the women's health head person who I know personally, and I asked her, why haven't they done anything? Have they been talking about it? And she wasn't even aware of anything. And lo and behold, a few days later, I get a message that, oh, they made a public statement. Well, finally, it took you long enough, right? But I said to her, I was like, this is great and all. This is fantastic. They finally made a public statement. I don't know, and I don't really care if it was because of the email I sent or not, but they need to take that further. It needs to not just be a statement. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Action needs to be taken. I was impressed with the action statements that they did pledge to make, but as I said, I'm not a member, but I for sure will be following up to make sure that they do make those they do take the actions, I'm holding them accountable. So anything that I hear, I'm holding organizations and groups and people accountable. If you say you're going to do this, I'm watching and I'm waiting. And I think we all need to do that.
I definitely would love to see the APTA and the governing body that's over education. I think a policy that needs to be implemented is the mandatory education on health disparity and DEI. It just needs to be in there, not just one lecture, or one or two lectures, which is kind of what happened at UM. It needs to be like bare minimum of series of lectures. It needs to be some sort of curriculum that's mandatory in every program, no matter how diverse they are. So that is a policy change on the educational side that I would love to see. And I think it would really help, because in order to teach something, you have to learn it. So the faculty would have to either find someone or learn it themselves. And then by default, the students are going to be able to receive that information, all of the students of color, students not of color. And you have to be tested on it. You have to know. You can't be out here blind. You can't know how to relate to someone if you have no idea what they've been through. And it's all relevant. We can't continue to say, well, these things are in the past. These past things are affecting the now. It's just simply not over. So we need to be educated on that as healthcare providers.
Especially with us wanting to be in the forefront as a profession. I know that's been a big push. One reason why we have the doctorates. Like, we want to be known as the go-to people. How are we the go-to people when something as big as this, the health disparities, they're not taught? Mm-hmm. But that's how we can actually set ourselves apart, if we actually focus on the policies for that. I love these ideas, and I'm really hoping someone's listening who can really help implement that, because I know there's always all these other debates going on about the next steps for what we should do as a profession. But this is how we set ourselves apart. This is how we get ahead, and truly can make sure we're making gains for our patients and for ourselves.
Definitely. We have some faculty members asking if you guys are going to become PT faculty of the future. So
I've actually been asked, but I'm still part-time. I'm going to start a part-time position next fall, and continue guest lecturing. I just like my flexibility, but I'm going to be in more classes.
Yeah, same. I've kind of been in a couple talks with schools to kind of do like a little part-time faculty, position to be able to talk about this. So hopefully it comes into fruition for sure.
And even with the faculty watching, even if this is something that they think they could take back to their schools or their programs and figure out a way to incorporate it, you have guest lecturers here. We have different things that we can bring. I know Dr. Kenael and I had a webinar for 2 weeks where we talked about the health disparities of the Black experience in healthcare from both the patient and the provider perspective, because we think that those are two separate but equal things to talk about, how we as healthcare professionals and our experiences, whether it's microaggressions and all those other things, how that affects us in the clinics, but then also how the patient. So even if there's someone who thinks like, wow, we need to kind of pivot and think about this, hit our DMs, as we've been saying.
The DMs is where it's at. I mean, I can attest to that, right?
Haley, we've got another live question.
Yes.
You want to take one?
Yep.
So this is kind of on a little bit of a different note, but students want to know, after we graduate and we're on the job hunt, do you guys have any suggestions as to how, either specific questions or how we can find out about the culture of the clinic and how they manage any sort of racially charged comments, and how they support the employees and promote inclusion via the employees and also via patients that they see?
Go to the clinic. Okay. When I was, interviewing clinics to work at, one of the questions I asked was, can I see your clinic? So of course they're going to put up the best for you when you're on the phone and in the interview, and even when you come to shadow that day, they're going to put on the best for you. So go in there, do that thing, and then come back again. Do a surprise visit. Bring a cupcake. Like, oh, hey, I'm just here to, say hello. I'm still considering the offer, and just watch.
And, you know, there were questions I had about the clinic I was going to be working at. And I had a perception, and what I saw was, you know, something a little bit different. So the only way for you to really see is to go. So a scheduled visit is good, and sometimes a surprise visit is even better. Okay, so you just have to go because they can tell you they want you. You're a new grad, you're fresh. I mean, you're big dollar signs for them. So they're gonna put whatever they can out there to get you to choose them. But you need to be the detective on the other side. Do some research. When you're there shadowing, talk with the patient, like, how do you like your care? You know, talk with them and get that inside scoop.
Excellent.
And then Dr. Savage, do you get to interview other clinics? Because I know you're travel, so would you be able to?
So all of our interviews are done by phone. So when I am talking to the different clinics to get my contracts, I am asking them, what's the culture of your clinic? What do the majority of your patients look like? I ask them, well, I tell them my experience. I've experienced racial slurs before. How do we go about that as a clinic to handle that? So I ask those hard questions, not in a threatening, aggressive way, but in a very concerning, like, because I am here to treat them. How do you handle your people of color employees? So, yeah.
And I will add to that and say that if you do go to a clinic and you find out what the environment looks and feels like, or you ask the question, what happens if someone calls me a racial slur, or I hear another employee or PT call that to someone else or another patient, how do they handle that? And if you don't like the response, you don't want to be there. Why would you want to be at a place like that that does not value people? We all go into PT wanting to help people, so there's no reason to settle. I don't care if the money's good. I don't care if it's convenient, right? It's easier for me to say that because I have my own clinic, but I do what I want, and you should do what you want too. Like, do not settle. My advisor in school always told me, you can do whatever you want, whether you're working for someone else or you're working for yourself. Never settle. And if you're uncomfortable with the answer or the response or how it looks and feels, move on. You can do much better than that.
This is your first experience of setting your boundaries as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And because I mean, you spend most of your time at work. So during this time, during these interviews, take it seriously, because there's nothing worse than being in an environment that's not right for you. You will burn out quickly. I'm giving you all that heads up. That's one reason why I have my own practice. So you will burn out quickly. So set up your own boundaries and make sure you ask the right questions, and really listen to your instinct. Like our gut instincts like really tell the truth, but if the money's sitting right or is only 5 minutes from our clinic or from our home, we tend to convince ourselves otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you think that kind of boundary setting plays in as a student who's looking for their clinical rotations? Just because, it's a little different, I know, even program to program, but obviously you can't necessarily just go to the clinic and be like, hey, I'm here, that sort of thing. So how would you see that kind of playing out in a professional, but, addressing it sort of way?
So are you saying more like your relationship possibly with your CI? Because if you don't have a good relationship with your CI, you need to make sure you contact your school, because there's nothing more stressful than having experience where you don't think your CI is going to back you up. Because there have been instances where people have almost failed out because of little microaggressions that were going around, but the student didn't feel comfortable. So no, we don't have as much control as your clinical rotation. You need to get your rotation so you graduate, right? But again, making sure you establish those relationships. If you feel funny about your CI, speak with your school before the problem rises. Problem may not rise, but just speak beforehand.
Definitely just having a conversation. Dr. Scott?
Yes, I just wanted to second that motion just from personal experience and several other classmates. And I mean, the moment you get the inkling that something is not right, you need to start the conversation then. And so I was very blessed because the faculty at our program are very attentive to that. And she walked me through it because, you got to get through it. You got to graduate. For me, it was the last one. I'm like, I can't mess this up. So as soon as I saw that there could potentially be an issue here, I let my faculty know, and they just walked with me, and they let me know, hey, we know you. We've been teaching you for the past 3 years, so we're going to have your back. Just you need to call us. We'll be calling you, update us every week what's going on. And either they will step in. If it gets bad enough, your faculty will step in. But what my faculty did was guide me in how to have a mature conversation with my CI, and what things to say, what things to do, just to get through it. They were there. They were ready to pounce if it was going to get crazy.
But speak out first, because I've had some people try to navigate on their own. Initially, I'm like, if you've never been in that situation before, you want the professional who is your faculty member to help navigate for you. So I totally agree with Dr. Scott.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, just because I know just in talking with classmates, that's a huge thing that comes up, is you don't want to, like we said, we need to graduate and take these things, and it's nice to have someone to kind of advocate for you who has that level of authority, of course.
Haley, do you mind taking another live question?
Oh yeah, of course. Go for it.
So you've all have mentioned in one way or another some of the personal struggles, either that you've seen or that you've personally kind of encountered on your during your time as a professional. One of the questions is, what's the most significant either obstacle or challenge that you've experienced being a physical therapist and a person of color in a predominantly white profession such as the one we're all pursuing?
I can jump at one of my bigger struggles was dealing with the microaggressions. I remember this this contract I'm on now, when I entered into the skilled nursing facility, they automatically assumed I was a new CNA, housekeeper, and then when I said, no, I'm the physical therapist, the director even said, oh, you're the PTA. And I said, no, I'm the physical therapist. So dealing with some of those microaggressions, not knocking any of those professions because they're all needed, but it was just like, I've said I was a physical therapist, or even when they introduce me to other people, they'll say, oh, this is Mrs. X, she's our OT, and then this is Bria, she works in our rehab department. And I'm like, I'm a therapist, I'm the only one here. So definitely with those microaggressions, my hair, and then even getting comments saying, oh, when you make my coffee, you make the color of Bria's skin. I'm like, can't say that. And so it's almost like that balance of, I have to pick and choose my battles. Do I want to take every single thing to my supervisor, or do I tough it out and just feel uncomfortable in certain situations? So definitely dealing with the microaggressions has been one of my bigger obstacles.
For me, when I was in the clinic, I'm a nerd. I choose to be a nerd. I'm a nerd. And so I grew up always watching the news. And I would be the only person in the clinic to watch the news. And I'm down here in Texas, purposely during election season, I don't talk politics. Even though I can talk to people left and right about it, I don't bring it up in the clinic. I just know how divisive it could be. But I've had several clients who would say certain things where I'm just kind of like, And with what I do, I'm a pelvic floor therapist and I'm a lymphedema therapist. So oftentimes, even if I was in a busy clinic, I was in a private treatment room. So I had to get really creative with some people, and I was treating them in the gym. Was it the best treatment they could get? Probably not. Was it hurting them? No. But it was one of those where I'm like, to protect myself, I need to have witnesses. So I needed to go into the gym and do manual lymphatic drainage in the gym, curtains closed, but I had also one of our techs nearby where I'm like, hey, help out with other people, but pass by every once in a while just so I can have a witness to this conversation. Because I don't want them to say that I'm neglecting her by refusing to treat her, since I'm the only person who can do this, but her comments are rude. Her comments can easily be inflammatory. Plus, of course, the conversation like, oh, you're the first Black person I've been this close to. You're not like all the other Black people. I'm like, I don't know how to respond to that. Like, I'm not going to respond to that. I'm just going to keep quiet and keep doing this manual lymphatic drainage. But you learn over the years how to be professional and protect yourself. And in my own private practice, I get that vibe. Like, my picture is all over my website. So you know right off the bat if you want to work with me. And
Yep.
so that has been probably one of the best things for me, is that when I'm in my private practice, people make their decision before coming in my door.
Yes, I purposely put my picture on my website, and it's also on Google. So if you search my practice, you find me, my picture, so they know. So I know anyone coming in the door is comfortable with who I am.
which is sad that you have to create your own safe space. That's a whole nother topic, but unfortunately, you know, if you're like the only Black person in the whole clinic, after a while, it can be tiresome. So that's probably been the hardest as far as a profession.
I think for me, I live in the Black bubble. Okay, so I'm in Atlanta. So both of my places at work are full of people of color. So I actually find that the most difficult things for me to navigate are when my people are being prejudiced themselves and having these conversations that disrespect other people of color. And it is always uncomfortable, but I remember one of my patients just made a joke about a person that was just absolutely uncalled for. And I said, oh no. And the whole clinic was just like, oh no. But you have to, because like you've been oppressed and made fun of, and yes, that does not make it right for you to make fun of someone else, to say inappropriate jokes about someone else. And, you know, being a young Black person, that also comes with its own stigma, because older Black people, you know, you can't just say anything.
With respect.
But, you know,
now, Mrs. Jones.
You're older than me, you wise. So as a young person, I still will speak up and say, okay, no, we're not going to talk like that. You know, we're not going to do that. You know, so I definitely have experienced kind of the opposite, and almost having to advocate for the one or two of my white patients that were making sure they're not going to get attacked or whatever, especially in the climate that we're in right now. So it's kind of been the opposite for me, but it's just as uncomfortable, because like I love my people, but we have the ability to be wrong as well.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we had a few questions before about your code switching blog post, Dr. Cromartie. I just wanted to know if you could speak to how this code switching affects your ability or your practice, if it does currently, and kind of how that kind of plays into your life.
I'm sorry, you had froze the last part of that question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Just if you could speak to how this code switching that you talked about in the blog affects your practice today.
Okay. So I guess for those who don't know, code switching is kind of like, you know, when people change their language or language style, you know, based on the environment they're in. And for some, it can be like an essential skill to kind of keep climbing that ladder. And, you know, it's like when we go into a space that's not familiar and we basically are trying to imitate or emulate the perceived actions of others just so that we can fit in. And so for me, I definitely find myself code switching a lot, especially more now that I've written the blog. In the clinic, I've noticed that, you know, I always approach every patient the same way, you know, but once I've had my evaluation or get to like the end of my eval or even the first treatment, I've kind of felt them out and they felt me out. And from there, that kind of lets me know if I can let my guard down and kind of really be my true self and how I talk. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, so I have like this, you know, slow speech, you know, that I, you know, will find myself trying to make sure I get out of, especially if I'm talking to someone that's not from the South. So like just that in itself, you know, it's one less thing that I have to worry about when I'm treating someone, if, you know, I see that they, you know, have taken a liking to me and vice versa. And it's not always a person of color. Like some people, you know, who aren't African-American, you know, I'll connect with, and, you know, when I feel that connection, I will kind of notice myself slipping up and I'll see if they caught what I said or, you know, kind of frown their eyes at me or whatever. But it definitely, you know, is a factor at times. But I try to, once again, stay consistent until, you know, I see where it's a safe space. Cause, you know, kind of, you know, like Dr. Savage said, you know, a lot of people, one, don't expect me to be the PT. So, you know, when I tell them like, oh yeah, you know, I'm a doctor in physical therapy, they're like, a doctor, you know, so like that in itself, you know, they're already surprised at that. So I try to make sure, I guess, I play the part and, you know, speak very articulate, pronounce every, you know, consonant, syllable of each word and things like that. But then once, you know, I guess I've proved myself to them, then I'm like, all right, I can, you know, take this shield off and be myself or whatever.
Thank you for sharing. And again, yeah, I mean, I read your blog post and I think I'll put it up, like I said, on the event page, but it's good to hear kind of how your perspective is now as well. and kind of how that affects your practice now.
You know, they also say code switching is our survival tactic. We learn at a young age, and again, goes back to being tired at times and not being ourselves. So thank you for talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. We have another question, kind of about back to, I know we talked about this a little bit, but I just wanted to see if you guys had any extra steps on what admissions committees of DPT programs should be, what kind of steps they should be taking to admit more diverse cohorts. I know a lot of you mentioned that you might have been the only Black person in your cohort, and how valuable that would be, especially in faculty and I imagine your peers. So if anybody have any ideas or just steps that they would think would be beneficial towards creating that student experience?
I love that some schools are doing Casper now instead of the GRE. And Casper is one of the tests for like your personality, if you will. And I think that's great because studies have shown typically people of color don't do the greatest on standardized tests, just based off how learning styles, right? It doesn't mean that we're not smart, but it's just, again, learning style. So I think the personality test is going to, when more schools change or adapt that, I think is going to be, or adopt, I'm sorry, I think it's going to be a big changer when it's more about personality than the GRE.
And is that a test, because I know obviously the GRE, you know, sometimes payment can be, like Dr. Scott was talking about raising money for and stuff. Is that something you still pay for? Is it expensive?
I believe they still pay for it, which again will be another factor, because even with application processes, one reason why I ended up at the school I was at, because the application fee was like $25. I'm like, why not? You know, like that's unheard of. So, but that's rare. So application fees and then the admissions tests, I think I was looking at those costs, because we already know the cost. That's like a never ending conversation that I know the PT programs don't have control over, but the cost of PT school at the end of it, you know, that pretty little dollar sign at the end.
I think an audit too on selection process is going to be necessary, because I mean, you're going to naturally as a program want to defend your selection and say, no, everything we do is justified, but you're actually going to probably have to go back and have an audit of your selection process. How many students of color actually, one, make it to the interview? When they do make it to the interview, what are the differences on why you select some versus the other? Why didn't these 10 people make it in? You know, you're going to have to go back. I think as a program, all programs have to go back and look and say, what actually happens? You know, what happens from the PT cast to the interview process to our final selection? And is there truly a difference in these students of color that we didn't select? And if not, why didn't we select them? Mm-hmm. That's going to be a hard conversation to have, but it probably needs to be had.
It'll have to be an external audit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, I know we're coming up on our time, so I don't want to go over that. I know you guys' time is valuable, and some of you are on the East Coast and stuff like that. But just kind of wrapping up, I know we've talked about a couple kind of points of action. Of course, keeping these conversations going, not just during this time, but throughout, things like admissions, creating curricular threads, and kind of advocating for those ways, in addition to the patient rapport we've talked about. Is there anything else as far as take-home points that we can do to try and make these conversations sustainable and just keep doing the work?
I mean, I think we've been touching on it this whole time, kind of bringing it to the classroom. We know how much PT students love grades. So I think, you know, the more we make it kind of mandatory, at least they're, you know, not everyone after graduation may take it with them into the clinic, but at least now we can't say that they were acting out of ignorance because they didn't know any better. You know, at least we now know, hey, you were educated on this, you know right from wrong, you know what's going on out there, you know, so it's now your part to kind of make sure that you follow through with this. So I think, you know, the biggest thing is kind of on the education side. In academia, try to make sure that it's there, because that's our first, I won't say our first exposure, but, you know, that's us getting ready for the PT world. So, you know, if it's there, I think that kind of at least lays the foundation for the rest of our PT career.
Yeah, thank you for that.
And I would also say, when these conversations are happening, be open, listen to understand, and not just to respond. That goes from faculty to students. Really listen and try to empathize versus, you hear their point. Now let me give you my counter point. So really just listen to understand, and be very proactive with the conversations. Don't wait around for someone else to start the conversation. If it's not happening, be the one to start the conversation.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to butt in really quick. We had somebody say the Casper test is only $10, so that's exciting.
Better.
Great. Anybody else have anything to add to those final points?
I will just say that this conversation, I think we're all happy that the conversation is finally being had, and people are open to hear, and they're listening and trying to make change. But I will also say that the conversation needs to continue. It needs to not end ever. It just needs to continue because, on the cultural competence, when it was created, right? Cultural competence for educational programs for PT schools, it's not an end point, it's a process. So the process needs to continue. It's a journey. You're never at the end of cultural competence. No one's ever fully culturally competent. There's no such thing, because there's always something to learn. There's always a new group to learn about. There's always a new religion or something. There's always something that you didn't know that you need to learn about, a new group of individuals that you've never worked with before, and you need to be culturally competent in order to work with them. But that doesn't mean that you read an article and you watch a webinar and you're done. It needs to continue.
I agree with you. Thank you for that. Dr. Scott?
Yes, just continue to support these movements that are happening. I'm gonna keep plugging if you're pick me up, but there's other movements out there that are gonna continue to happen. Like I said, Celebration Diversity Gala happens every year, and I was shocked to know how many students of color had no idea what that even was. Like, that's the gala for you. That scholarship money is for you, and the students didn't even know. So just getting the information out there for the resources that are out there for minority students, and just championing those. And as in the profession as clinicians, just being up to date on that stuff and not being afraid to reach out to our circles, keeping our DMs open, making sure we're telling everybody, what's really going on. So I say never keep your mouth shut. Always keep the lips flapping, because we need to keep talking about this.
And I love what everyone said. I guess for me, I'll just add one thing I think might help students, especially because with a lot of these webinars, people are like, but how do I do this? How do I speak out whenever something's happening in clinic? I don't know if it's something that the faculty can have as far as after certain rotations, when the class comes back, this happened. How should I have addressed this, or how can I address this? Like, really helping all of the students navigate situations and making sure, because everyone's going to go to a clinical and see something. If they're truly paying attention, they're going to see something that they need to learn how to speak up for. So I think having that open dialogue for true navigation, how to feel comfortable going through these different processes, is going to help us all grow. And you're just going to be a better clinician, and people are going to love you. So why not?
Yeah, I can attest to that. I mean, I know personally, it would be super helpful to have those sort of reflective conversations after clinic. And speaking from experience, just on my one clinical, it's, there were times where I didn't speak up when I should have, and it's those kind of reflective conversations, I think, that would be helpful to navigate for future clinics, and when we're hopefully PTs in the future.
Yeah, being back in the clinic.
One day it'll happen. Well, thank you guys so much. If we have some people wondering where they can follow you, I imagine we could just post that instead of having to go around, so they can kind of keep up with you guys on Instagram, send you those DMs, and that sort of thing. But tons of thank yous in the chat, and really big thank you from me as well. It's really nice to hear your guys' perspectives and start this conversation, and like we said, keep it going in different ways that we can reach everyone. Students, faculty, clinicians, everybody. So I really thank you for your time. If you guys want to stay on just for a second, but everyone, thank you on Facebook Live for tuning in. And I will also post those discount codes I talked about for our sponsors and announce some raffle winners here in the next day or so. So thank you guys for attending and engaging. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for doing it.
Bye, Facebook. Okie dokie, let's see.
Yay, that was awesome.